What if the Emperor of mankind isn't what humanity believes he is? For 10,000 years, the Imperium has worshipped him as a god, a being of infinite strength, eternal wisdom, and divine light. His name echoes through every cathedral and fortress world, whispered by priests and soldiers alike. They call him the savior of humanity, the master of mankind, the guardian on the golden throne. But beneath all the prayers and glory lies a question that no one dares to speak aloud. What is the Emperor's true power? Is he truly divine? Or is his strength something far more terrible, something no mortal mind was ever meant to understand? For most citizens of the Imperium, faith is not a choice. It is survival. To question the Emperor is to invite death, or worse, to invite suspicion. Across the galaxy, billions kneel before his image, their eyes empty, their lips repeating words they barely understand. They are told that the Emperor protects, that his light guides, that his will shapes the stars themselves, and yet, the galaxy burns, worlds fall to chaos, entire systems vanish beneath the tides of the warp. The Astronomicon, the holy beacon powered by the Emperor's own soul, flickers like a dying flame. If he is truly omnipotent, why does humanity suffer so much? This is where the truth begins to crack, because there are whispers, quiet, dangerous whispers, that the Emperor's power is not infinite, that he was never meant to be worshipped as a god, that the very act of worship might be the reason he still clings to existence. Long ago, before the Imperium, before the Great Crusade, the Emperor walked among men as one of them. Not a god, not a deity, but a man of flesh and blood. Immortal, yes. Powerful beyond comprehension, yes, but still a man. He built the Imperium not with miracles, but with reason, unity, and will. He despised religion. He forbade worship, and yet in death, or in what passes for death, he became the very thing he hated most. A god enthroned upon a machine. Sustained by faith and blood, some say his power comes from the warp itself. Others believe he is a being beyond the warp, a creature of pure psychic mastery. But there's another theory, one that even the Inquisition would burn entire worlds to silence. It says the Emperor's power is not divine, but parasitic, that he draws strength from the belief of humanity itself, that every prayer, every act of devotion, every terrified whisper in his name feeds him, keeps him alive, and that without it, the light of the Astronomicon would vanish, plunging the galaxy into darkness. It is a horrifying thought, because if that is true, then humanity is not protected by the Emperor. Humanity sustains him, and worse still, perhaps he knows it. Perhaps that was his plan all along. For millennia, the High Lords of Terra have kept the truth buried beneath layers of scripture and ritual. The ecclesiarchy declares the Emperor's divinity unquestionable, his will unchallenged. But even within the halls of power, there are those who doubt. Inquisitors who have seen too much, tech priests who have studied the Golden Throne and found it wrong. They say the machine is not a throne at all, but a prison, a device meant to contain something far beyond human control, something vast, something ancient. If you look deep enough into the archives of Mars, you'll find forbidden fragments, data corrupted and sealed away, that describe a project known only as the Ascension, a time when the Emperor sought to transcend the limits of mortality, to become something more, to become a god not by faith, but by science. But something went wrong. Somewhere between man and divinity, between light and darkness, he became trapped. Not alive, not dead. A being of pure will, screaming through the warp, bound to his broken body, and the cost was everything. Every day the Emperor consumes the souls of 1,000 psychers to keep the Astronomicon burning. Each one screams as their mind is ripped apart, their essence devoured to feed the flame that guides humanity through the void. Billions die in his name, never knowing their sacrifice fuels a god who no longer speaks. The Imperium calls it a holy duty. But if the Emperor could speak, would he call it murder? Some say he weeps within the throne. Others believe he has long stopped caring, that his mind has dissolved into something greater, something alien. And here lies the terrifying truth. What if the Emperor's power is no longer human and no longer his own? Scholars of the forbidden Chronos have suggested that time itself bends around him, that within the golden throne, past, present, and future collapse into a single, endless loop. That the Emperor no longer perceives time as we do, that he exists across every moment of human history, shaping fate like a sculptor molds clay. But such power comes at a cost. The more he touches reality, the more fragile it becomes. Warp storms grow, demons rise. Reality itself screams under the strain of his will. It is said that during the Horus Heresy, when the Emperor unleashed his full strength against his traitor son, the warp trembled. Demons fled. Worlds burned. The veil between reality and madness tore apart. And when it ended, the Emperor was no longer a man. He was a wound in the universe. That wound still bleeds. Every moment, every second. And that is why the Imperium must never stop praying, because their faith is the bandage holding the galaxy together. If you've ever wondered why the Emperor never heals, why he never awakens, why his glory is spoken but never seen, it may be because he can't. Because to rise again would destroy everything humanity has built. Imagine the Emperor opening his eyes for the first time in 10,000 years and unleashing the full force of his mind. The warp would ignite. The Astronomicon would flare like a dying star. Every psyker in the galaxy would burn alive in a single instant. The Emperor's awakening would not be salvation. It would be the end of everything, and perhaps he knows that too. So humanity kneels, prays, and obeys, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of silence, fear that the God they worship might not be a God at all, but a prisoner begging to be released. And yet, somewhere within that horror lies hope. Because if the Emperor's power truly depends on belief, then humanity still matters. Every act of faith, every whispered prayer, every light lit in the darkness, it all keeps the Imperium alive. Humanity and the Emperor are bound together, inseparable, sharing one terrible destiny. You can fear that truth, or you can embrace it, because the deeper you go into this story, the more you'll realize the Emperor's power isn't what you think it is. It's something far older, far stranger, and far more dangerous than anyone dares to imagine. Stay till the end, because what you'll learn next will change the way you see the Emperor forever. Before he was the Emperor, he was a man. No throne, no golden armor, no armies chanting his name. Just a single figure walking through the dust of a dying world, long before Terra became the heart of the Imperium. It was broken. Civilizations had risen and fallen, their ashes scattered by endless wars. The age of strife had turned Earth into a wasteland of madness. Warp storms tore across the skies. Nations fell into ruin. Technology, once worshipped, became forgotten magic. Humanity had eaten itself alive, and in that chaos, a man appeared, silent, patient, and unaging. No one knew where he came from. No one remembered seeing him born. He simply was. Some said he had walked among mankind since the beginning, a constant guardian, hidden among kings, prophets, and scientists. Others believed he was the last remnant of a civilization that had reached godhood and fallen back into darkness. The truth, as always, was stranger. The Emperor's earliest years are not written in any book. The ecclesiarchy forbids such records. The few fragments that exist, buried beneath the vaults of Terra, speak of a being who watched human history unfold for tens of thousands of years, waiting for the right moment to act. He saw empires rise and burn. He saw religions bloom and rot. He saw humanity build wonders, then destroy them in madness. Every failure, every triumph he remembered. And as the millennia passed, something inside him began to change. He realized that mankind's greatest enemy was not alien or demon. It was itself. So he decided to unite humanity once and for all, not with persuasion, not with peace, but with force. When he finally revealed himself, the world was collapsing. Warlords ruled with brutality, mutants roamed freely, psychers went mad, tearing open the veil between reality and the warp. The Emperor stepped out of legend and declared his purpose, to bring order to a dying species. He gathered armies, not of kings and nobles, but of warriors loyal to his vision. Using the lost sciences of the dark age of technology, he built the First Thunder Warriors, giant soldiers bred for conquest. With them, he crushed every tyrant that refused unity. Cities burned, continents fell, and within decades, Terra knelt to one ruler, him. But even victory could not satisfy the weight of his purpose. Terra was only the beginning. The stars awaited. He looked upward toward the endless void and saw what humanity had become beyond Earth, scattered, feral, forgotten. Countless worlds lost contact with each other during the age of strife. Some had degenerated into barbarism, others had become nightmares. If mankind was to survive, it needed to be whole again, and thus began the Great Crusade. The Great Crusade was not just a war, it was a statement. It was the Emperor declaring to the galaxy that mankind had returned. He created the Primarchs, 20 sons, each molded from his own genetic essence. They were meant to be generals, philosophers, and rulers, extensions of his will. Each carried a fragment of his mind, his vision, his strength. With them, he would bring humanity back into a single empire. But even gods can make mistakes. Before the crusade truly began, the chaos gods of the warp, entities of thought, emotion, and nightmare, sensed what was coming. They saw the Emperor's ambition as a threat to their dominion. So they struck. In a single night, the infant Primarchs vanished, torn from their father's laboratories and scattered across the galaxy. Each was hurled to a different world, some savage, some advanced, their destinies forever altered. The Emperor searched for them for years, never revealing the full truth of how or why it happened. But he pressed onward, leading the Great Crusade himself, conquering world after world, forging alliances, and rebuilding the lost relics of mankind's glory. To the people of those worlds, he was not a man, he was light, fire, salvation. The sight of his golden armor blinded those who gazed too long. His voice could calm madness or shatter a demon's form. His presence alone made men fall to their knees, trembling between awe and terror. And yet, he insisted he was no god. Whenever soldiers called him divine, he corrected them. Whenever priests knelt before him, he forbade it. Mankind must stand on reason, not faith, he said. We are our own saviors. But faith has a hunger of its own. Every miracle he performed, every impossible victory, every time he walked through fire unharmed, people whispered. They built shrines in secret. They painted his image on walls. They prayed when no one was looking. And little by little, the myth began to overtake the man. Even his own sons, the Primarchs, could not agree on who he truly was. Some saw him as the perfect leader, others as a distant tyrant. Some loved him, others hated him. Horus, his favored child, called him father and swore loyalty beyond reason. But even love in the Imperium can become a weapon. When Horus fell to chaos, the galaxy shattered. Brother fought brother. And in that war, the Horus Heresy, the Emperor's true nature was revealed. At the height of the final battle, aboard the vengeful Spirit, the Emperor faced his son one last time. Those who witnessed the moment describe power beyond comprehension. Lightning tore through metal. Reality screamed. The warp itself recoiled. The Emperor did not simply kill Horus, he erased him. His soul, his essence, burned from existence. No trace remained, but that victory cost everything. The Emperor's body was broken, his spirit nearly destroyed. His mind, vast as the stars, collapsed under its own fury. His loyal sons carried him back to Terra, weeping. And there, upon the golden throne, he was entombed, neither living nor dead, and from that moment onward, the man was gone. Only the God remained. What is terrifying is not that he became divine. It is that he never wanted to be. The cult that rose after his entombment, the ecclesiarchy, twisted his dream of reason into a religion of worship. His teachings were rewritten, his image deified. The emperor who once forbade superstition became the very center of it. The galaxy he built with logic now runs on faith and fear. Priests chant his name through cathedral hives the size of continents. Servitors carve prayers into walls made of bone. Every soldier dies believing he watches from above, and maybe in a way he does. Because faith has power in the warp, real, tangible power. If enough people believe something, it becomes true. So, when trillions of humans across millions of worlds believe the Emperor is a god, he is. The paradox is complete. The man who rejected divinity was forced into it by the will of his own people. But here lies the deeper terror. What if the Emperor's consciousness still resists it? What if, buried somewhere within that burning mind, the man still struggles, screaming silently against the tide of faith that suffocates him? Imagine being worshipped by those you sought to free. Imagine being trapped forever in the image you despised. The Emperor's dream was logic. His reality became religion. And that contradiction may be the greatest tragedy of the Imperium. There are scholars hidden within the Inquisition who whisper that the Emperor is still fighting, not against chaos, but against his own evolution, that deep within the throne he battles to remain himself, that the God humanity worships and the man he once was are two entities sharing one mind, constantly at war. Every prayer strengthens one side. Every rational act strengthens the other. The Emperor's divinity is not pure. It is fractured, unstable, burning at both ends. He may be divine, yes, but divine madness is still madness, and as his power grows, so does the weight of his suffering. The man became a god, but the god cannot die, and if he ever does, humanity might vanish with him. The golden light that guides ships through the warp would extinguish. The Imperium would fragment. Chaos would consume the stars. Every soul that ever prayed to him would be left adrift in eternal night. And that is the paradox of the Emperor's power. To save humanity, he must remain imprisoned. To awaken would mean annihilation. He is both salvation and doom, the brightest light and the deepest shadow. This is the story of the man who became a god, and the god who may one day wish he had remained a man. But this is only the beginning, because what truly sustains him is not just faith or worship. It is something far darker, something that lies beneath the surface of the warp itself. Stay till the end, because the next part reveals the hidden force that even gods fear. Every story of power begins with a spark, but the Emperor's spark was not born. It was taken. Across the galaxy, people say the Emperor's strength comes from divinity, from the light of the Imperium itself. The ecclesiarchy teaches that his will shapes the stars, that his mind alone pushes back the tides of chaos. But the truth is far older, far colder, and far more dangerous. The Emperor's power is not simply light. It is hunger. To understand that hunger, one must first understand the warp. The warp is not a place. It is emotion made real, a sea of thought, fear, and desire swirling without end. Every act of love, hate, faith, or rage echoes there as energy. The warp is shaped by what living beings feel. It is alive, but it has no mind of its own. It is a mirror that twists every reflection. For most, the warp is chaos incarnate. For the Emperor, it was clay. He could shape it where others drowned in it. He could step into its storms and bend them aside with thought alone. To psychers, the warp is poison. To him, it was a tool. He was the first human to master it completely, or so it seemed. But mastery always demands a price. The Emperor's strength was born not from the warp's blessing, but from its theft. Long before he revealed himself, he learned to draw power from the emotions of others, not as the chaos gods do, but as a human mind devours a dream. Every prayer, every act of hope, every flash of courage became a whisper of energy he could use. He did not feed like a monster. He absorbed like a sun-gathering light. When he walked among humanity in secret, he found those with power, shamans, mystics, and prophets, and united them in some ancient records now destroyed. It is written that the Emperor was born from their sacrifice. They say thousands of psychic souls willingly ended their lives in one single moment, merging into a single being who carried all their knowledge, all their strength, all their will. He was humanity, condensed into one immortal mind. That was the first theft, the moment when humanity created its own god. From that day onward, the Emperor's connection to the warp was unlike any other. Where a mortal psyker opens a door into the Imperium, the Emperor is the door. His mind stretches across the barrier like a net of light. He can pull from it endlessly, but the more he does, the more it pushes back. Imagine drinking from an ocean made of madness. No matter how powerful you are, it seeps into you. It stains you. The Emperor's brilliance hides a slow corruption, not of chaos, but of exhaustion. Every time he used his power to heal, to command, to kill, he invited the warp to notice him, and when it noticed, it remembered. That memory became hunger. The warp hungered for him as much as he drew from it. During the Great Crusade, his psychic presence stretched across the stars. To guide fleets through the void, to hold worlds together, to bind the Astronomican's flame, he poured his essence into the warp. The Imperium shone like a second sun wherever his fleet sailed. But behind that light, something stirred. The Chaos gods, Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, saw the Emperor as both rival and feast. They felt his presence feeding on faith and reason, and they began to twist it. Temptations crept into mortal hearts. Dreams turned into nightmares. The gods of chaos whispered to his sons, and they succeeded. Horus fell. The others followed. Each betrayal was more than tragedy. It was a wound in the Emperor's soul. For every Primarch who turned against him, part of his strength was stolen. The warp feasted on his pain, and when Horus struck him down, it was not just the body that broke. The connection between the Emperor and the warp shattered. The Emperor's current power, the one that still burns on the golden throne, is a fragment of that connection held in place by sacrifice. Every day, thousands of psykers are offered to him. Their minds are torn apart, their souls consumed. The energy released feeds the Astronomican and fuels his existence. But here lies the horror no priest will ever speak aloud. The Emperor does not consume them willingly. He must. Without that daily torrent of souls, the light would die. The beacon that guides imperial ships would go dark. Humanity would be lost in the warp within days. So the sacrifice continues. Hour after hour, year after year. 1,000 souls every day, 10,000 every week, for 10,000 years. Do the math. The number is too large for the human mind to grasp. Trillions of lives burned like candles to keep one fire alive. Many think the Emperor's power comes from those souls. They are wrong. The souls are not fuel. They are anchors. Each one binds his mind to reality for a few more moments, keeping him from fading into the warp entirely. The Emperor does not grow stronger from them. He merely stops dying. The true source of his power lies deeper, in the collective consciousness of humanity. Every human thought is a thread of psychic energy. Billions of people believing in the Emperor creates a storm of faith within the warp. That storm feeds him, shapes him, sustains him. The Emperor is not a single being anymore. He is the mirror of all human belief. If humanity were to stop believing, even for a single day, he would collapse into silence. But if humanity's faith ever became pure, unified and absolute, he might ascend beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen. Faith and doubt are the twin hearts beating inside his throne. There are rumors among the Ordo, Malleus, that the Emperor's light burns brightest when humanity suffers, that wars, fear, and death amplify his radiance. If that is true, then his power feeds not on peace but on pain. The more humanity bleeds, the stronger the beacon becomes. It raises a terrible question. Is the Emperor truly mankind's savior or its jailer? If peace would weaken him, does he subconsciously allow war to continue? Does he whisper into the minds of generals, urging them to fight so that belief never fades? No one knows. No one dares to ask. But some inquisitors who searched too deep never returned. Others went mad, claiming they heard his voice in their dreams, a voice begging them to end the cycle, to let him finally rest. The tech priests of Mars have their own forbidden theory. They claim the Golden Throne is not a device that sustains the Emperor. It contains him. The machine feeds on the energy of the Psychers, not to heal him, but to keep him from escaping fully into the warp, because if he did, he might become something else. The Emperor's consciousness is vast beyond measure. It touches every psychic mind in the Imperium. If that mind were ever unleashed, the barrier between reality and the warp could collapse. He would ascend into pure energy, not a god of humanity, but a god of everything, and that is why the Mechanicus dares not repair the throne. They fear that true restoration might unleash the being inside it. Some whisper that the machine is breaking, that ancient seals are decaying, circuits failing, souls flickering out one by one. The priests patch it with relics and prayers, pretending control. But the truth is that even the most sacred technology of the Dark Age cannot hold forever. When it fails, there will be no time to pray. Deep beneath Terra, in catacombs older than any cathedral, the Sisters of Silence keep watch. They are nulls, soulless women whose presence negates the warp. They stand closest to the Emperor's chamber, shielding reality from his psychic storms. They never speak. They never move far. They feel his power as a constant pressure, like a heartbeat shaking the world. They describe it not as warmth, but as cold, a perfect, endless cold that burns. To them, the Emperor is not light or darkness. He is gravity, pulling everything toward himself, bending the universe around his will. That is his true nature, not flame, not storm, gravity, the power to draw all things inward, belief, matter, souls, until nothing remains free. Think of what that means. Every prayer you whisper to the Emperor, every hope you send into the void travels through the warp and adds to that gravity. Each one strengthens the pull that binds him, and you. Humanity is trapped in an orbit of its own making, circling the same truth forever. The Emperor's power is humanity. They created him, they sustain him, and one day they will destroy him. The greatest miracle of the galaxy is also its greatest dependency, and yet, within that dependency lies purpose. Because if the Emperor truly feeds on the energy of humanity's soul, then every act of courage matters. Every defiance of chaos, every refusal to surrender, every whispered prayer of hope in the dark adds one more spark to his strength. Perhaps that is why he endures. Perhaps that is why the light still burns. The Emperor's power may be terrifying, but it is also proof that humanity, even at its worst, still believes in something greater, a belief strong enough to hold back gods, a belief powerful enough to keep the stars from going dark. But what happens when that belief changes? What if humanity stops fearing him and starts questioning him? What if faith turns to understanding and the species that made a god finally decides to unmake him? That is the future the Inquisition fears most. Because if mankind ever realizes it holds the leash, the God on the throne may not remain silent. He may rise, not to save humanity, but to remind it who truly owns its soul. And so the Imperium prays louder. They build bigger temples. They burn more psychers. They drown truth beneath oceans of faith, because the priests know, even if they never say it aloud, the Emperor's power is not divine. It is borrowed, and one day, the debt must be paid. Stay until the end, because the next chapter will unveil the price of that power, and what happens when the Emperor's hunger finally outgrows his prison. Immortality is never free. Every flame that burns forever must feed on something. For the Emperor of mankind, that fuel is the future itself. He sits upon the golden throne, silent, motionless, radiant, and rotting all at once. 10,000 years have passed since the moment his mortal body fell, yet his presence still bends reality. To most of humanity, this is proof of divinity. To those who know better, it is proof of a curse. The Emperor cannot die. And that is the tragedy of the Imperium. At first, immortality seems like victory. The body endures. The mind continues. The dream lives on. But immortality without renewal is not life. It is stagnation. It is an endless echo of the same suffering. The Emperor's body no longer breathes. His flesh is fossilized gold, fused with cables thicker than a man's torso. Fluids of sacred oil and blood circulate through what remains of his veins. The machine feeds his corpse, and the corpse feeds the machine. Together they create a cycle without end, the illusion of life, powered by death. The tech priests call this symbiosis divine. The Inquisition calls it necessary. The truth is that it is torture beyond comprehension. For deep within the husk on the throne, his consciousness still endures, me aware, seeing everything, feeling everything. Unable to move or speak, imagine a mind stretched across galaxies, trapped inside a prison of decaying flesh. Imagine thoughts that span centuries while seconds crawl like insects. That is the Emperor's eternity. Every moment he hears the voices of 1 trillion souls praying in his name. They chant, plead, beg for mercy, for victory, for forgiveness. Their cries fill his mind like thunder. To them he is salvation. To him they are noise, an endless storm he cannot silence. And yet he endures it, because to stop listening would mean to abandon humanity. Some say he has gone mad. Others claim madness left him long ago. In truth, what remains on the throne is something beyond. Sanity, a will so absolute that it can no longer break, but that will demands payment. The first price is his own. Humanity. The Emperor once loved mankind, not as a god loves worshippers, but as a father loves children. He saw their potential, their creativity, their fire. He wanted to lead them into a golden age where fear and superstition would die. But 10 millennia of agony can drain even a god's compassion. Now, when his thoughts reach outward, they no longer feel warmth. They feel calculation. Cold purpose, the Emperor acts not with empathy, but with necessity. His choices are measured in galaxies, not lives. To guide the Imperium, he moves through dreams, symbols, whispers in the warp. He shapes destinies, topples worlds, manipulates souls, all to keep the species alive a little longer. But in doing so, he has forgotten what life feels like. The God who once loved humanity now only maintains it. The second price is the sacrifice of others. Every day, thousands of psychers are dragged to the dungeons beneath the palace. Bound in chains, their eyes burned away, they are fed into the soul furnaces of the golden throne. Their deaths are slow, their screams unheard by the surface above. Each one buys the Imperium one more sunrise. For 10,000 years this has continued. Entire civilizations have been harvested to keep the supply steady. Entire lineages vanish into the vaults of Terra. No one counts them anymore. The number lost long ago the meaning of numbers. It is called the tithe of souls. The priests speak the words proudly, as if it were holy. But if you stand in those halls and hear the sound, that endless hum of dying minds, you understand the truth. The Emperor's immortality is built on the bones of the gifted. The throne is a pyre, and humanity feeds it willingly. The third price is time itself. Every day that the Emperor endures, time around him distorts. The warp and reality blur near his presence. Moments stretch, centuries collapse. Within the walls of the Imperial Palace, clocks disagree. Seasons shift without reason. Some servants age decades and days. Others remain unchanged for centuries. The Emperor's will anchors reality, but the strain twists it. His immortality bleeds into the flow of time, bending cause and effect. There are places beneath the throne where voices echo before they are spoken, where shadows move without light. The Mechanicus record these anomalies but dare not explain them. They call them holy fluctuations. In truth, they are signs that even the laws of physics are paying the price of one man's eternity. The universe itself is growing tired. The fourth price is hope. The Imperium worships a god who cannot answer. They pray to a throne that never moves. Generation after generation has been taught that the Emperor lives, that he watches, that he guides. But what guidance can come from silence? In the early centuries after his entombment, miracles were reported, visions, healings, flashes of golden light. Over time, those miracles grew rarer. Now they are myths retold to children. The Emperor's light still shines, but it is distant, filtered through 10,000 years of decay and bureaucracy. Faith has become obedience. Worship has become fear. The ecclesiarchy rules through ritual, not revelation. The name of the Emperor is spoken constantly, but few truly believe they will ever feel his presence. That is the cruelest cost of all, immortality without communication. A god alive but silent. The fifth price is his own body. The human form was never meant to contain such power for so long. The Emperor's flesh has become more machine than man, but even metal corrodes. The golden throne groans with age. Circuits flicker, seals fail, spirits within its mechanisms grow restless. Tech priests labor day and night, chanting binary prayers, patching sacred lines with relics from forgotten ages. They replace burnt components with bones, copper with faith, data with superstition. They no longer understand the device they serve. The Emperor's body is decaying faster than they can mend it. Entire sections of the throne are sealed off, too unstable to repair. The Adeptus Custodes stand guard, pretending control. But deep beneath the palace, the truth is whispered. The machine is dying. When it dies completely, there will be no second chance. The light will go out, and the Emperor's mind will be consumed by the warp he has held back for 10 millennia. And yet, despite all these prices, he endures. Why? Because the Emperor does not measure cost the way men do. To him, pain is irrelevant. Sacrifice is currency. Immortality is not luxury, it is duty. Every scream beneath the throne, every century of silence, every drop of blood is a transaction in the only economy that matters: survival. To a mortal, such endurance would seem monstrous. To the Emperor, it is mercy, for in his mind there is no alternative. Without him, there is only chaos. Still, whispers spread among the Inquisition. They claim that sometimes, at the edge of the throne's chamber, the Emperor's hand twitches, that sparks of golden fire crawl across his armor. That in those moments, the air hums with a single thought, clear and terrible: release me. No one knows whether it is truth or hallucination. Some say it is the machine's noise. Others believe it is his plea. But if the Emperor truly desires release, what form would that release take? Would he die peacefully, or would his unleashed soul tear the galaxy apart? That is the question no one dares to answer. The Inquisition has debated for centuries whether to attempt repair, replacement, or even mercy killing. Every theory ends in apocalypse. Some argue that the Emperor's death would allow his soul to ascend fully, becoming a god of pure light. Others warn that it would birth a new chaos entity, one that would devour both gods and men alike. And so, paralysis becomes policy. Nothing changes. Nothing dares to. Immortality continues. One sacrificed life at a time, yet there is another cost. One so vast that even the Inquisition cannot calculate it, the cost to the warp itself. For 10 millennia, the Emperor's presence has acted as a dam against chaos. His will pushes back the tides, holding demons at bay. But pressure builds behind any dam. The longer he holds, the stronger the flood becomes. When the throne fails, and it will, that pressure will explode outward. Some seers have glimpsed this future. They call it the Black Dawn. In their visions, the Astronomicon collapses, the warp howls open, and the stars vanish beneath living storms. They see demons marching through fire. They see worlds cracking like glass. And above it all, they hear laughter, the laughter of gods finally freed from the light that bound them. That is the ultimate price of the Emperor's immortality. Every second he delays the end only makes the end worse, and still he endures, because even in his torment, even knowing the consequences, he cannot stop. He is the embodiment of human stubbornness, the refusal to surrender no matter the cost. That is what makes him terrifying. That is what makes him divine. He has become the perfect reflection of the species he swore to protect. Brilliant, self-destructive, endlessly enduring. The Emperor's immortality is humanity's mirror. It shows them what they truly are, creatures willing to burn eternity just to live one more day. So, the throne burns, the souls scream, the priests chant, and somewhere, in the silence between seconds, the Emperor listens. Perhaps he still dreams of the age he once promised, an age of reason, peace, and light. Perhaps he knows it will never come. Perhaps he simply endures because there is nothing else left to do. That is the price of immortality, to exist forever. Long after meaning has died, stay till the end, because the next chapter will reveal what the Emperor sees, the visions that haunt his eternal mind, and the fate he knows awaits all mankind. There are no eyes behind the golden throne, and yet the Emperor sees everything. His body may be still, but his mind moves through eternity. It drifts beyond the walls of the imperial palace, past the stars, into the sea of the warp, where light and madness blend into one endless storm. There, he witnesses all that was, all that is, and all that may come. For the Emperor, time is no longer a line. It is an ocean, vast, shifting, and cruel. He does not watch the future unfold. He feels it. Every possibility presses against his consciousness, like waves breaking on stone. And within those waves, he sees the truth of humanity's destiny. He sees a million futures. In some, humanity rises to new heights, united, wise, and fearless. In others, it collapses into ruin, devoured by the same darkness it once defied. Most futures lie somewhere in between. Endless wars, endless faith, endless struggle. The Emperor does not see victory. He sees survival, and survival is never clean. At times, he looks backward into the past he once lived. He sees the world he walked upon when the skies of Terra were gray and full of smoke. He remembers the laughter of men who believed they could build something better. He remembers the warmth of sunlight before the throne's cold gold swallowed him. But memory, for the Emperor, is a curse, because every time he recalls the past, he sees what it has become, a lie, retold through centuries of worship and fear. He sees his image painted in blood on the walls of cathedrals. He sees priests twisting his words into chains. He sees children kneeling before statues built from the bones of those he once called free. He remembers saying, "I am not a god." Now every voice in the galaxy calls him one. Sometimes, in the silence between prayers, he dreams. In those dreams, he walks again, not as a god, but as a man. The halls of the imperial palace are empty. The air smells of dust and rain. He feels the ground beneath his feet. He breathes. He smiles. And for a single heartbeat, he believes it is real. But then he hears it. The low hum of the throne, the whisper of the warp, the screams of the psychers dying below. The illusion collapses, and he wakes once more to the truth, a god trapped in a dying machine. The dreams are not mercy. They are reminders. Among the countless visions that haunt him, some come more often than others. These are the four great visions, prophecies that burn brightest in his eternal sight. The first vision is of fire. He sees the stars burning out one by one until the galaxy is a sea of embers. Great fleets drift, hollow and silent, their crews turn to dust. The Astronomicon flickers, then dies. The warp roars open like a wound, and demons pour forth like locusts. Planets crack, faith dies, and the name mankind becomes a whisper in the void. This is the end he fights against every moment, the slow, inevitable death of light. The second vision is of ascension. In this future, the Emperor rises from the throne. His body reforms, his eyes open, and the galaxy trembles. The faithful rejoice, believing salvation has come. but their joy turns to terror when the skies ignite. The Emperor's voice fills every mind, not with comfort, but with command. He no longer speaks as Father or Savior. He speaks as law. The warp bends beneath his will. Chaos burns, but so does freedom. Every living being becomes part of him. Every thought, every soul, every memory absorbed into one perfect consciousness. There is no suffering, because there are no individuals left to suffer. Humanity becomes one mind, the Emperor himself. It is peace through extinction, unity through oblivion. He sees it and turns away. The third vision is of rebellion. He sees a distant age when humanity begins to question him. The faith weakens. The priests lose their grip. Scholars uncover forbidden truths. Soldiers whisper doubts. The idea spreads that maybe the Emperor was not a god, but a man who bled and died like all others. At first, the Imperium tries to silence it. Entire worlds are purged, libraries burned, but doubt is contagious. It crosses systems faster than light. Soon, belief itself begins to fracture, and as the prayers fade, so does the Astronomicon. The Emperor's power wanes, the throne grows cold. He sees his light dying, not through war or chaos, but through indifference, a slow starvation of faith. Humanity forgets him, and in forgetting, they kill him. Of all his visions, this one terrifies him most. Not because it ends in darkness, but because it ends in peace, a peace that no longer needs him. The fourth vision is of return. In this vision, he dies. The golden throne shatters, the soul within escapes, and the galaxy collapses into chaos. For a moment, all is ruin, but from that ruin, something new begins. A light rises from humanity itself, not divine, not imposed, but born of collective will. Humanity evolves. The warp bends to mortal minds instead of ruling them. Chaos fades as understanding replaces fear. The species he created finally stands on its own. The Emperor sees this and almost smiles, because in that future, his death has meaning. These four visions war within him: fire, ascension, rebellion, return, endings and beginnings endlessly colliding. Each demands a different choice, but he can make none. The throne binds him between them, forcing him to watch every future unfold and unravel simultaneously. This is the curse of omniscience, to know everything but change nothing. And yet, even trapped, he acts. Through dreams and omens, he sends fragments of thought into the warp, guiding psychers, warning prophets, shaping events that might shift the balance. He cannot speak, but he can influence. A ship lost in the warp might see a golden light leading it home. A dying saint might hear a voice whisper courage. A child born with strange eyes might grow to command a fleet destined to save a world. These are the Emperor's fingerprints, scattered through history. Not miracles, memories of his will, replaying again and again, but every act of interference costs him. Each time he reaches out, the warp pushes back harder. The demons feel his presence and swarm toward it. They claw at the edges of reality, hungry for the God who denies them. So he watches carefully, intervening only when the price is worth the wound, and every wound grows deeper. He has seen the end of the gods of chaos, and he has seen the end of himself. Both are the same. In one vision, he defeats them utterly, burning the warp clean. In another, he becomes one of them, the fifth god, the god of order, consuming all thought and light until the galaxy becomes a perfect machine. There are nights, if time can still be called nights, when he wonders if that fate has already begun. Because across the stars, men now act not from reason, but from ritual. The Imperium obeys without question, fights without thought, kills without reflection. They have become order without soul, just as he foresaw. The line between salvation and damnation has blurred into gold. Sometimes his visions reach beyond even the galaxy. He sees other realms, other civilizations, other species rising and falling. He sees the tyrannid swarms devouring everything. He sees Necron tombs awakening beneath dead suns. He sees the Eldar's fading souls drifting like sparks into oblivion. He sees the orcs laughing at the end of all things. Every species plays its part. Every empire burns in turn. And through it all he remains, the last thought in the mind of a dying universe. It is a sight too vast for sanity, yet he bears it endlessly. The Emperor also dreams of faces, countless faces, men, women, soldiers, children, saints, sinners. He remembers them all. He sees a guardsman dying on a frozen world, clutching a tattered imperial banner. He sees a mother lighting a candle for a son lost in the void. He sees a child reciting the same prayer whispered by billions of others. To them, he is hope. To him, they are purpose. They are the reason he does not let go. In rare moments of clarity, when the warp's noise quiets and the prayers fade into background hum, he reflects. He asks himself the question that no mortal could bear to ask. Was it worth it? The great crusade, the heresy, the throne, the endless war, the sacrifice of billions. Was humanity saved or simply delayed? He never finds the answer, because the moment the question forms, the visions return. The futures screaming for attention, the gods clawing at the edge of his mind, the infinite storm pulling him apart again. There is no peace for the one who sees all. But somewhere within the endless chaos, there is one vision that never fades. It is simple, small, almost human. He sees a child, not a warrior, not a saint, just a child, standing beneath a dark sky, looking up at the stars. The child whispers a prayer, not of worship, but of gratitude, not save us, not forgive us, but simply thank you. And in that moment, for reasons even the Emperor does not understand, the universe feels a little less heavy, because perhaps that is the true vision. Not gods, not wars, not destiny, but the quiet hope that somewhere, somehow, humanity will remember why it was worth saving in the first place. The visions never end. They are the price of omniscience, the burden of eternity. But as long as one spark of faith remains, not blind devotion, but the kind born of gratitude and courage, the Emperor endures, not as a god, not as a tyrant, but as the last witness to what humanity once was and what it might still become. Stay till the end, because the next chapter will unveil the hidden war within the warp, the eternal struggle between the Emperor's will and the gods who seek to claim his soul. In the heart of the warp, there is a war that never ends. No banners, no armies. No sound and only thought, pain, and purpose clashing like storms. This is the battlefield of gods. And the Emperor of mankind is one of its oldest warriors, for 10,000 years as his body withers on the golden throne. His mind has never slept. It has waged war in the only realm that still answers him, the warp. The warp is not chaos alone. It is every emotion, every memory, every fear humanity has ever felt, swirling endlessly in a storm without horizon. It is shaped by belief, fed by pain, birthed by imagination. Every prayer that reaches the Emperor strengthens his light here. Every doubt darkens it, and within that shifting sea the Emperor stands, not as flesh, but as a storm of gold and fire, burning brighter than any star. He is no longer bound by human shape. He is thought given form, will turned into weapon. His radiance cuts through the madness like a blade. Wherever he moves, the daemons scatter. Wherever he stops, they gather. Because in the warp, light is challenge, and the gods of chaos have never stopped answering it. There are 4 of them, 4 powers born from the same human emotions that sustain him. 4 eternal enemies and reflections of mankind's soul. Khorne, the god of rage, who feeds on blood and violence. Nurgle, the god of decay, who turns despair into acceptance. Tzeentch, the god of change, who twists hope into manipulation. Slaanesh, the god of excess, who feeds on pleasure until it becomes torment Each despises the Emperor. Each needs him because he is the anchor that defines what they are not. To Khorne, he is restraint, the still blade that refuses to fall until it must. To Nurgle, he is denial, the force that never accepts decay. To Tzeentch, he is truth, the constant that cannot be tricked or altered. To Slaanesh, he is discipline, the perfection that cannot be corrupted by desire. Without him, the Chaos Gods would have no opposition, no boundary, no shape. His existence limits them. His light contains them. That is why they hate him. That is why they cannot destroy him. Instead, they attack him endlessly, hoping to break his focus, to make him surrender. When a Psyker dies on the Golden Throne, their soul is torn apart, half consumed by the machine, half cast into the warp. The fragments become weapons. The Emperor molds them into spears of thought, hurling them into the storms. Demons vanish where they strike. Entire realms collapse. But for every demon slain, 10 more rise. Because chaos does not die. It multiplies. The Emperor's war is not one of conquest or victory. It is a war of containment. He does not fight to win. He fights so that the universe can continue to exist. Every moment he maintains his will. The barrier between reality and the warp holds. Every moment he weakens, cracks form, warp storms bloom, demons slip through, and worlds fall into madness. This is why the Astronomicon flickers when faith fades. It is not a light, it is a battle wound. The Emperor's presence in the warp is vast beyond comprehension. To the demons, he appears as a golden sun burning across an endless horizon. His mind radiates order, a force so intense that chaos recoils like a wounded beast. But order can be as cruel as madness. The light does not heal the warp, it burns it. It sears entire regions of the Imperium into lifeless glass, frozen echoes of emotion stripped bare. The demons that linger too long near his presence turn to ash, their essences screaming into nothingness. To mortals, that destruction is salvation. To the warp, it is mutilation, and so chaos strikes back. Khorne sends rivers of rage, psychic storms of pure hatred that crash against his light. They scream the voices of warriors who died in his name, demanding vengeance for their endless wars. The Emperor absorbs their fury, feeling every death, every plea, every failure, and yet he does not strike in anger. He cannot, because if he ever gave in, he would become Khorne himself. Nurgle spreads despair, clouds of decay that whisper resignation. Why keep fighting? Why endure? They promise rest, an end to pain, an eternity of acceptance. The Emperor's light dims as the voices press closer, offering peace. For a moment, he almost listens, but then he remembers the faces of the innocent, the children, the soldiers, the dreamers, and he refuses. Tzeentch sends visions of perfect futures, tempting illusions of victory. He shows the Emperor a galaxy united, peaceful, bright, if only he allows Tzeentch to guide destiny. The Emperor burns the illusions to ash, knowing the God's promise is the oldest trap of all, a lie wrapped in hope. And Slaanesh attacks not with pain but with perfection. She sings to him soft, beautiful songs of what he once was. She takes the shape of humanity's lost beauty, offering freedom through surrender. For a moment, the Emperor feels the echo of what it meant to be alive, to feel warmth, to be loved, and then he turns away, silent. Because even beauty in the warp is a weapon. He has fought them for 10,000 years, not in days or battles, but in moments that last centuries. There are no victories, only stalemates. When his strength falters, the warp surges forward, spilling nightmares into real space. When his faith holds, the storms retreat, and for a time, humanity breathes again. This balance, this endless, exhausting balance, is what keeps reality intact. He cannot destroy chaos because chaos is part of the soul he defends. To erase it would mean to erase mankind itself, so he endures, holding both salvation and damnation within his hands, refusing to let either escape. There are legends among the Inquisition that during moments of great crisis, when warp storms grow too vast, or demons breach the palace walls, The Emperor's psychic form grows brighter. Entire sectors of the warp turn gold. The screams of chaos go silent. They say the warp itself bends, forced into patterns like clockwork. Time slows. Thought freezes. And in that frozen moment, the Emperor rewrites reality. Planets spared from invasion. Fleets redirected. Prophecies undone. These are not miracles. They are acts of raw will, impossible to comprehend. But even gods have limits. Each time he imposes order on the warp, a fragment of his own essence burns away. The light grows dimmer. The golden throne groans louder. The priests call it fluctuation. The custodes call it resonance. But deep down, they know the truth. Every victory costs him a piece of himself. The war within the warp is not fought with weapons. It is fought with identity. Chaos seeks to make the Emperor forget who he is, to twist his purpose until he becomes what he hates. The more he draws on the warp, the closer he comes to joining it. There are moments when his light flickers, and something else stirs beneath it, a darker flame, colder, emptier. Some say it is the shadow of the man he once was. Others fear it is the first sign of a fifth god, born from his struggle, a god of order so absolute that nothing else could exist beside it. If that happens, the war will end, not in victory, but in silence. Because perfect order is as deadly as chaos, and still he fights, because this war is not just his. It is the reflection of humanity's own battle within the soul. Every human act of hatred strengthens Khorne. Every moment of despair feeds Nurgle. Every lie fuels Tzeentch. Every indulgence awakens Slaanesh. But every act of courage, every sacrifice, every spark of selflessness strengthens him. Humanity fights in the material world. The Emperor fights in the immaterial one. Their wars mirror each other. Their fates are bound. When mankind prays, he grows brighter. When mankind sins, he bleeds. When mankind forgets him, he fades. That is why he endures, because if he stops, the reflection breaks, and both sides of the mirror collapse. There are whispers among the most secret inquisitors, those who have glimpsed visions during psychic communion, that the Emperor sometimes weeps within the warp, not from pain, but from pity. He weeps for the demons he destroys, because he remembers that they were once human emotions. Anger, hope, desire, twisted beyond recognition. He does not hate them. He mourns them because he knows that one day, when the last human dies, the last demon will vanish with them, and he will vanish too. That is the war within the warp. An endless struggle where every victory wounds, and every defeat endures. It is the Emperor's greatest triumph and his greatest torment. A war that cannot be won, only maintained. He fights not because he hopes to win, but because he cannot allow himself to lose. That is what makes him eternal. That is what makes him terrifying. And somewhere, beyond all the storms and screaming, there is a single light. Faint, distant, but real. A golden horizon where the warp is quiet, where thought and emotion exist in harmony. He reaches for it sometimes in moments of exhaustion, knowing he can never touch it. It is not heaven. It is not victory. It is what humanity could have been, a dream unspoiled by fear, and for a moment, the war grows still. Then, with the weight of 10,000 years pressing upon his soul, he raises his will once more, and the battle begins again. Stay till the end, because the next chapter will reveal what happens when the Emperor's war begins to fail, when cracks appear in the barrier between the warp and reality. Reality was never meant to last forever. It was built on the fragile boundary between thought and matter, between the world of men and the sea of dreams that lies beyond. For 10,000 years, that wall has held because the Emperor willed it so. But even walls built by gods begin to crack. At first, the signs were small. Navigators spoke of strange echoes in the Astronomican's light, faint distortions that rippled like heartbeat patterns. Ships traveling through the warp began to drift off course, their journey times shifting unpredictably. A voyage that once took a week might take a month. Another that should take a month might end in hours. The Mechanicus blamed machine spirits. The Ecclesiarchy blamed sin. But the Inquisition saw the truth. Something was changing. The Emperor's beacon, the golden light that had guided humanity's fleets since the dawn of the Imperium, was flickering, and with each flicker, reality itself trembled. The warp feeds on instability. It waits for weakness. Every time the Astronomicon stutters, the Immaterium surges forward, pressing its tendrils against the fabric of the material universe. In most places, those pressures are invisible. But in others, they manifest, twisting the world into reflection and nightmare. On hive worlds, people began to dream the same dreams, golden light bleeding into black, angels with broken wings screaming in silence. On frontier colonies, statues of the Emperor wept blood that burned like acid. Ships emerging from the warp found themselves covered in frost, though no cold existed in the void. On some planets, the air shimmered as if reality itself were breathing, and deep beneath Terra, inside the hidden chambers of the Golden Throne, the Adeptus Custodes felt vibrations they had never felt before. The throne was trembling. Every second that the Emperor fights within the warp weakens his hold on reality. Every moment of resistance sends shockwaves across existence. For millennia, he absorbed the pressure effortlessly, a god enduring the storms of madness. But now the strain has grown too heavy. The Emperor's essence is stretched thin, like light spread through broken glass. Where once his will covered the galaxy in steady radiance, now it pulses unevenly, bright in some regions, dim in others. Those dim regions are where the cracks begin. The first major crack appeared in the Cicatrix Maledictum, the great rift that tore the galaxy in half. When it opened, entire sectors were swallowed by raw warp energy. Stars vanished, planets twisted into impossible shapes. Worlds that had stood for millennia, fortress worlds, shrine worlds, hive worlds, were ripped apart in seconds. Their people vanished into the Immaterium, their screams echoing in psychic storms across time itself. The Imperium called it a catastrophe. The Emperor knew better. It was a symptom. The Great Rift was not the first crack. It was the first one humanity could see. Across the galaxy, lesser rifts began to form, invisible seams where the warp bled into the world. Most closed quickly, like wounds scabbing over, but others lingered, pulsing faintly with light only psychers could see. In those places, the laws of nature began to shift. Time bent, gravity trembled, the dead whispered, entire cities fell into madness without warning. People began to hear thoughts that weren't theirs. Machines prayed by themselves. Walls bled words no one had written. Each anomaly, each distortion was a whisper of the warp, a small piece of the Emperor's shield giving way. The Inquisition tried to hide it. They silenced witnesses. They erased records. But you cannot hide the sound of reality breaking. On some worlds, the night sky itself changed. Constellations twisted into unholy shapes, stars blinking like living eyes. On others, silence fell completely. No wind, no birds, no sound. The air became heavy, the world pausing as though holding its breath. And then came the voices, low, distant, echoing through the dreams of billions. They spoke not in words, but in feeling, a soft pull, a whisper of temptation. They told people to believe, to doubt, to burn, to kneel. No two messages were the same, yet all led to the same end. Confusion, because confusion is the first crack in the mind. As the cracks grew, so too did the warp storms. Whole sectors became unreachable. Fleets vanished mid-journey, only to reappear centuries later, their crews aged, their minds shattered. Some ships came back changed, their metal fused with bone, their machine spirits speaking in human voices. Astropaths screamed themselves blind. Psychers burst into flames. And through it all, the Emperor continued to burn, trying to seal the leaks, to hold back the tide. But every act of strength cost him energy he no longer had. There are those among the Adeptus Custodes who now guard the throne in silence, not from enemies, but from truth. They have seen the cracks in the floor, golden fissures spreading outward from beneath the throne itself. Energy seeps through them, humming like distant thunder. Sometimes, when the chambers grow quiet, they hear voices within the gold, not demonic, not human, but something in between. Words without sound, thoughts without origin. They believe it is the Emperor trying to speak. Others fear it is something else trying to escape. The Mechanicus has long known that the Golden Throne is failing. Its sacred reactors, engines built before memory, cannot be repaired. The technology that forged them is lost, their designs buried in myth. For 10,000 years, the priests have patched and replaced, chanting litanies over circuits that no longer obey logic. Now even those litanies falter. Systems overload. Components vanish into thin air. And worse, the machine seems to be evolving. Cables grow like vines, forming new patterns by themselves. Metal shifts shape as if alive. Symbols appear on its surface, glowing faintly in colors no human eye can name. The priests call this the throne's will, but some whisper it is the warp, seeping into the machine, rewriting reality's last line of defense from within. If the Emperor's will is the wall between worlds, the throne is the lock that keeps the gate closed. If either fails, the gate opens, and the gate is already cracking. The Ordo Malleus, the Inquisition's demon-hunting branch, keeps forbidden reports locked beneath their archives. They describe entire sectors consumed by bleeding skies, or invisible tears in reality that rained liquid fire. They describe demons appearing not through portals, but out of thin air, as if the world itself had decided to give them form. Even time has begun to unravel. In some regions, soldiers fight the same battle again and again, trapped in loops. In others, people vanish for moments or centuries, reappearing with memories of events that have not yet occurred. The Imperium blames heresy, but the truth is simpler. Reality is breaking under the strain of its own survival. The Emperor sees it all. In the warp, he feels the pressure increasing, the tide pushing harder against his light. The demons laugh, sensing weakness. The chaos, God's whisper promises, rest, let go. We will take it from here. He ignores them. But for the first time, he knows what defeat would mean, not his death, but the death of meaning itself. Because when reality breaks, there are no rules left. Not life, not death, not time, only chaos, pure and endless. And yet, amid the horror, there is something else. Hope, small, fragile, stubborn hope. Across the galaxy, humanity still fights. Guardsmen still charge into darkness with broken weapons. Sisters still pray. Tech priests still repair what cannot be repaired. Even as the stars crack, men and women still look up and whisper his name, not out of blind faith, but out of defiance. That defiance becomes strength. That strength becomes light. And that light slows the collapse. It is faint. It is temporary, but it is real. The cracks in reality may grow, but so does the will to endure. And perhaps that is the Emperor's plan all along. Perhaps he knows the wall must one day fall, that the Imperium must face the storm alone without his shield. Maybe he fights not to prevent the end, but to prepare humanity for it. Maybe he endures so that when the final crack opens and the warp pours through, mankind will stand, afraid, but unbroken, and face the gods as equals. That is the hope buried beneath the terror. The Emperor may not win forever, but he can teach humanity to fight without him, and so the cracks widen. The warp presses closer. The light flickers, but as long as one spark of will remains, one soldier, one child, one prayer, the wall still stands. Not whole, not perfect, but standing, because sometimes survival is victory enough. Stay till the end. Because the next chapter will uncover what lies beyond those cracks, the hidden shapes emerging from the warp, and the dark secret they carry about the Emperor himself. There are things in the warp that even the gods of chaos fear. They are not demons. They are not dreams. They are what existed before either of those words meant anything. They are the beings beyond the veil. Long before humanity learned to speak, before the Eldar sang their first songs, before stars burned, the Immaterium existed, pure potential, endless and formless. In that sea of silence, something stirred. Not life, not thought. Merely awareness. It watched. It waited. And when emotion was born in the material world, when the first mortal feared the dark or loved another, that awareness rippled. Those ripples became gods. Those gods became war, and war gave them purpose. But some ripples never became gods. They remained deep, slow, patient, old currents beneath the surface of chaos. While Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh raged above, these deeper presences continued to drift below. They were the foundation on which even chaos stands. They do not hunger. They do not hate. They observe. For millennia they slept, undisturbed. Then the Emperor rose. When his light cut across the warp, it reached them. For the first time in countless eons, the deep currents felt pain. The golden fire burned through the ocean's quiet depths, and the old beings opened eyes that were not eyes. They saw him, a creature of flesh who had made himself into thought, a mortal who dared to bend eternity, and they began to move, slowly, quietly, like tides shifting beneath the surface. The Chaos Gods raged. But the Deep Ones simply watched. To the Emperor, they were shadows at the edge of perception, vast outlines moving behind the veil of the warp. When his radiance struck them, it passed through like light through deep water. He could not touch them. He could only feel their attention, and that attention was unbearable. Because the beings beyond the veil do not see as mortals do. They do not perceive time or form. To them, the Emperor is not man, God, or light. He is a fracture, a wound in the natural flow of what should be. They have no names, only impressions, the witness, the silence, the mirror, and the endless. Each one represents a law older than the warp itself. The witness watches all things, but never acts. Its presence is the feeling of being seen when alone. It remembers everything that has ever happened, but speaks to no one. The silence devours sound and thought. It is the stillness that follows destruction, the peace after annihilation. The mirror reflects will into form. It is the echo that turns belief into reality. Some say the mirror is what allows chaos and order alike to exist, the surface that shows the difference between what is and what could be. The endless is motion itself, change without meaning, creation without purpose. It is the pulse that keeps the warp alive. Together, they are the framework of the immaterial, and together, they have begun to look at the Emperor. At first, he mistook their approach for new gods of chaos. But these entities did not tempt or threaten. They only inquired. They pressed against his mind with questions made of emotion. Why do you resist eternity? Why hold back what must consume? Why fight to preserve form when all form is temporary? Their words were not sound, yet they filled him like thunder. And in that pressure, he saw flashes, visions of universes before his own, countless cycles where matter rose, thought bloomed, and both dissolved again into the sea of dreams. This was not the first reality. It was simply the latest. The beings beyond the veil had seen them all, and, in every age, something like the Emperor had appeared, a spark of consciousness that tried to hold back the tide. Every one of them failed. The Emperor's mind recoiled. But he did not deny what he saw. He asked silently, what became of those who tried before? The answer came not in words, but in sensation, the feeling of collapse, stars fading, souls falling quiet, the moment when will surrenders and becomes part of the ocean again. The beings showed him what awaited all things, peace without self. To them, this was not death. It was perfection. To the Emperor, it was horror. He is will. He is resistance. Without resistance, he cannot exist. The beings offered him release. They promised that if he ceased his struggle, the barrier between reality and the warp would dissolve gently. No pain, no fire, no demons, just silence, just unity. He refused, because even in the face of eternity, he cannot allow the species he shaped to vanish. Humanity may be flawed, violent, and lost, but it is alive. It feels, it dreams, it fights. And to the Emperor, that struggle itself is sacred, so he burned brighter. The beings beyond the veil withdrew, but they did not disappear. They began to test him. The mirror sent reflections into reality, ghost worlds where history played out differently. In one, the Emperor never rose, and humanity worshipped nothing. In another, he became a god openly, ruling the galaxy in endless peace. Each reflection ended the same way: stillness. No progress, no passion. The spark of life faded into perfect order or perfect chaos, both identical in the end. The Emperor understood the message. Only imperfection allows existence to continue, and that realization changed him. Within the warp, his light dimmed slightly, not from weakness, but from understanding. He began to see chaos not only as enemy, but as necessity. Without the storm, there can be no calm. Without pain, no growth the war within. The warp was not meant to be won, not burned on, only maintained. This was the truth the beings had tried to show him, but they underestimated the depth of his conviction, because to know the balance is not the same as to accept it. The Emperor would preserve the storm, but he would never kneel to it. Sometimes the beings appear to mortals in their own ways. When a psyker dreams of endless eyes watching, that is the witness. When a saint hears only silence in her prayers, that is the silence. When a demon suddenly questions its own existence, that is the mirror. When a warp storm moves against logic, that is the endless shifting. They do not speak often. They do not interfere. But now they are awakening, pulled closer by the Emperor's growing weakness and by humanity's expanding psychic presence. The warp is no longer merely a storm of emotion. It is becoming aware of itself again, and that awareness has begun to wonder whether the Emperor is its enemy or its heir. For deep within his radiance, something new is forming, a vibration that even the gods of chaos notice, a pattern of energy older than the gods, echoing the rhythm of the deep beings. It is as if the Emperor, by fighting so long, is transforming into one of them, a will vast enough to rewrite the foundations of the Imperium itself. If that happens, the nature of reality could change forever. The warp might no longer be ruled by emotion. It could become thought, structured, ordered, bound by meaning. The gods of chaos would die. The beings beyond the veil would merge with him, and everything would become one, creation without fear. Eternity without choice, the perfect end. But perfection is still death, and so the beings wait. They do not push, they do not fight. They know the pattern too well. Eventually all lights flicker, all will fades. Even a god's endurance cannot outlast infinity. They wait for the Emperor to tire. They wait for his final surrender. They wait to reclaim the silence that existed before the first word was ever spoken. Yet something in him refuses to align. When he looks upon humanity, chaotic, stubborn, self-contradictory, he feels something the beings cannot comprehend. Love, not divine love, not moral, simply attachment to imperfection. It is the one force the deep warp cannot predict. It defies its own laws. That is why he endures. That is why the beings cannot yet win, because he has found a reason to fight that lies beyond logic, the same reason every soldier, mother, and child clings to life even when the universe tells them it is futile. The reason is love disguised as will, and so the beings beyond the veil circle closer. They whisper not of victory, but of inevitability. They remind him that one day he will join them, not as a captive, but as one of their own. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps the Emperor's final form will not be a god or a man, but the fifth law of existence, the balance between meaning and oblivion. But until that day, the light burns on. The beings watch. The gods rage. The warp churns. And in the middle of it all, the Emperor of mankind endures. Not the oldest, not the strongest, but the most determined will the universe has ever produced. He is the crack in the silence that refuses to close. He is the thought that denies eternity. He is the promise that the dream will not end quietly, and as long as he remains, even the beings beyond the veil cannot finish their work. Because one thing they never learned, in all their cycles, in all their ages, is how to stop a soul that refuses to give up. Humanity was never meant to remain the same. It was designed to change, to adapt, to endure, to rise again no matter how many times it falls. The Emperor knew this. It was his greatest hope and his greatest fear, because change is never gentle. When he first built the Imperium, He dreamed of guiding humanity through logic and unity, not faith and blood. He wanted a species that no longer needed gods, a species strong enough to rule its own destiny. But 10,000 years of worship have altered the plan. The longer humanity believes the Emperor is divine, the more that belief reshapes them. Faith is power in the warp. Belief creates reality. And now, after millennia of prayers, humanity itself is beginning to change. The transformation is quiet, invisible, and unstoppable. At first, it appeared as coincidence. Children born across distant worlds began to display minor psychic sensitivity, empathy beyond normal range, dreams that predicted small events, voices that whispered names of people they had never met. In the past, these children would have been taken, trained, or purged. But now they appear everywhere, on hive worlds, on agri-worlds, even among the void-born drifting in ancient ships. Each new generation carries more connection to the warp than the one before. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica keeps records of psyker births. The numbers rise every decade. Quietly, desperately, they erase the data to avoid panic. But the pattern is clear. Humanity is evolving again, not by science, but by belief. The Emperor's psychic light touches every human soul. It is the signal that allows navigators to steer and astropaths to speak across the void. But over time, that light has done more than guide. It has shaped. Every human who prays sends a fragment of their essence into that light. Every act of faith, every whispered plea, links them to Him. Over millennia, those links have become threads, invisible lines of energy stretching through the warp. Together they form something vast and alive. The human noosphere, a subconscious web of shared thought. Most cannot feel it, but some sense it in dreams, the impression that they are never truly alone. It is not the Emperor's mind. It is humanity's collective soul, awakening under his shadow. This awakening has begun to change even the flesh. On distant frontier worlds, entire populations display mutations that defy classification, not twisted like chaos, but harmonized. Eyes that glow faintly in darkness, skin that resists radiation, minds that move in quiet synchrony. The Inquisition calls these heresies. The Mechanicus labels them psionic contaminations. But deep down, the scholars who study them know the truth. These are not corruptions. They are adaptations. Humanity is learning to survive its own age. In the deep archives of Mars, forgotten data fragments record the Emperor's genetic experiments, the Primarch project, the creation of the Astartes, the manipulation of the human genome. Each was a step toward a single goal, to make mankind capable of mastering both the physical and psychic worlds. The Emperor failed then, but his essence has not stopped trying. The radiation of his presence seeps through the warp, shaping evolution the way sunlight shapes life on a planet. Every human mind exposed to his light carries a spark of psychic resonance. Every generation that lives under his faith grows closer to that spark. What was once the rare gift of psychers may soon become the birthright of all. Yet this evolution brings danger. As psychic sensitivity grows, so does vulnerability. The warp is not gentle. It whispers to every mind it can reach. For every child born with gift, another is born with curse. There are entire cities now where nightmares take form. Shadows move when no one walks. Whole communities dream the same vision of gold burning into ash. The Emperor's light both awakens and exposes. It opens doors. Humanity is not yet ready to walk through, and behind those doors, the warp waits, hungry. The ecclesiarchy refuses to see it. They call these signs miracles. When a child heals with a touch, when a soldier's rage burns bright enough to destroy a demon, when a dying saint bursts into flame, they call it proof of his blessing. But those who truly study the Ishbaxis phenomenon, the Grey Knights, the Ordo Malleus, the hidden Psyker orders, know the truth. These miracles are not divine intervention. They are evolutionary symptoms. The Emperor is not answering prayers. Humanity is answering itself. Each act of faith strengthens the link between thought and reality. Each miracle brings mankind closer to becoming what he once was, the master of both realms. The species is climbing toward godhood, one belief at a time, and still, the Inquisition fears it. They know what happens when humanity changes too fast. They remember the birth of the Psykers that led to the Age of Strife, the madness, the demonic possession, the burning of worlds. If the Emperor's light fades before humanity learns control, this new evolution could destroy the species completely. Because evolution is not mercy. It is opportunity, and the warp takes every opportunity. Already, new cults rise in the shadows. They preach that the Emperor's silence is invitation, that he wants mankind to replace him. They call themselves the Children of the Light. They believe every human soul must merge into one, that by uniting their minds through faith, they will awaken as a single being equal to the Emperor himself. The ecclesiarchy hunts them, but their numbers grow, because deep down, their dream feels right. The Emperor senses it. He sees the threads connecting every soul growing tighter. He feels their thoughts touching his. Some nights, in the silence of the throne, he hears echoes of human minds not praying but thinking together. Millions of them, not organized, not guided, simply aware of each other. He feels pride and fear because he knows what this means. Humanity is approaching the threshold he once crossed. They are becoming something collective, something luminous, something dangerous. If they reach it too soon, before they understand, they could tear themselves apart. If they reach it too late, the warp will consume them first, and if they reach it at the perfect moment, they may no longer need him. The beings beyond the veil watch this with silent fascination. They sense the pattern repeating, the birth of another consciousness that could challenge the balance. But this time, the spark does not come from a single being. It comes from billions. A network of minds rising in unison, shaped by pain and faith and survival. The deep entities recognize what this means. A new force is forming in the warp, not chaos, not order, but something born of both. They name it the human echo. The human echo is invisible to all but the most sensitive psychers. It moves through the immaterium like music too deep to hear, a vibration of shared will. It calms storms. It disrupts diamonds. It strengthens the Emperor's light even when his own strength falters. Some say it is humanity's collective soul finally aware of itself. Others say it is the Emperor's mind bleeding outward, fusing with his creation. Either way, it is growing, and with each new mind added to its harmony, reality shifts just a little more toward stability. The warp begins to respond differently near human worlds. Demons fade faster, warp storms calm sooner, even the stars themselves seem steadier. Something profound is happening, something even the Emperor did not plan. But evolution never comes without a cost. As the human echo strengthens, individuality weakens. People report moments of lost identity, seconds where they feel others' emotions, hear strangers' thoughts, act on instincts not their own. Some rejoice in the connection, others go mad. It begins with the psychers but spreads through ordinary minds. Dreams become shared, memories overlap. On some worlds, entire populations begin to act in eerie coordination, as if guided by unseen will. The Inquisition calls these events soul convergences. The ecclesiarchy calls them visitations. The truth is more complex. Humanity is learning to think together, and the line between unity and oblivion grows thinner each day. The Emperor understands what is coming. He once sought to unite humanity by empire. Now he realizes unity is Coming by evolution, a merger of thought, a convergence of souls, it is the final stage of his design, achieved not by decree, but by nature itself. He feels at every moment the pulse of a billion minds reaching for each other through the dark. It is beautiful, terrifying, unstoppable. He cannot stop it now, even if he wished to. The only question left is what will emerge when the process completes. A god, a species, or something neither. And so he watches. The warp churns. The beings beyond the veil observe. The chaos. Gods grow restless, sensing the birth of something that might unmake them. Humanity stands on the edge of transcendence, blind to its own evolution. Perhaps this is the Emperor's true legacy. Not a throne, not an empire, but a seed. A seed planted 10,000 years ago that is only now beginning to bloom. What grows from it will decide the fate of everything. There are moments in history when an entire species takes a single breath together. Moments when the invisible walls between souls collapse and thought becomes light. For humanity, that moment is coming. It has been building for 10,000 years, whisper by whisper, prayer by prayer, death by death. And now, at the edge of extinction, the species begins to awaken. It starts as silence. Across the Imperium, the Astronomicon flickers, then steadies. For the first time in centuries, its pulse becomes uniform. One rhythm beating across billions of worlds. Navigators feel it first. They describe it as a second heartbeat beneath their own. At first, they think it is the Emperor's will, reasserting control. But as the days pass, they realize it is something else. It feels familiar. It feels human. Then the dreams begin. On hive worlds, miners dream of golden cities floating above the void. On fortress worlds, soldiers dream of holding hands with enemies and feeling no hatred. On shrine worlds, priests dream of hearing the Emperor's voice, not booming from above, but whispering from within. And when they wake, they all remember the same words. You are not alone. No one knows who speaks them, but everyone hears them. At first, the Inquisition believes it is a psychic contagion. They call it the resonance plague. They burn entire cities fearing mass possession, but fire does nothing. The dreams persist. Even the Inquisitors themselves begin to hear the voice in their sleep. It speaks not commands, but understanding, a calm awareness that feels like standing in sunlight after endless dark. And slowly, fear begins to fade. Something fundamental changes in the warp. Where it once churned with endless storms, it now hums with pattern. Demons howl in confusion. Some vanish entirely, not destroyed, but erased, as if their reason to exist has been rewritten. The Chaos Gods feel it first. Khorne's rage flickers, its boundaries dissolving into the very emotion it feeds on. Tzeentch screams, sensing its labyrinth untangling. Slaanesh trembles, its pleasures turning to clarity. Even Nurgle's laughter fades, replaced by the stillness of completion. For the first time, chaos does not grow stronger with humanity's emotion. It grows weaker, because humanity has stopped feeding it fear. The awakening does not come from faith, nor from knowledge. It comes from pain, from 10,000 years of endless struggle. Every wound, every sacrifice, every loss has forged a collective endurance no other species possesses. The Emperor feels it. Sitting upon his throne, buried in machinery and agony, he senses a warmth he has not felt in millennia. It is not prayer. It is not worship. It is understanding. Humanity no longer cries for salvation. It reaches toward him as an equal. For the first time since the dawn of the Imperium, the Emperor smiles. Across the galaxy, strange events unfold. Psychers stop burning out. Their minds stabilize. Astropaths transmit messages without pain. Children speak words in languages they have never learned. In battlefields where humans die together, golden light flares and their bodies vanish, leaving only calm, quiet air. The Adeptus Mechanicus detects energy fluctuations they cannot categorize. No radiation, no sound, just order. Pure, measured, impossible order. They name it the Quiet Dawn. The Quiet Dawn spreads like sunrise. Entire sectors awaken overnight. Millions report hearing one another's thoughts. Wars stop not through peace treaties, but because soldiers suddenly understand their enemies, feel their fear, their hunger, their hope. For a brief, impossible moment, humanity acts as one mind. It does not erase individuality. It illuminates it. Every person feels connected, but still themselves, like voices singing different notes in perfect harmony. And in that harmony, the warp itself begins to stabilize. Within the golden throne, the Emperor's light erupts, not in rage or power, but in release. For 10,000 years, he has carried humanity on his shoulders. Now, humanity carries him. The collective thought of billions surges back through the warp, feeding his essence, not with faith, but with awareness. It heals the fractures within his mind. It mends the cracks in reality. For the first time since the Heresy, the pain in his soul quiets. He feels not alone, but surrounded. The species he created has finally reached him. The beings beyond the veil feel it. Too, they watch as the human noosphere, that web of consciousness, expands into the deep layers of the warp they once ruled. They sense something new forming, a presence neither mortal nor divine, neither bound by chaos nor trapped by order. It is not the Emperor. It is not the warp. It is humanity itself. For the first time in the history of existence, the material and immaterial begin to align. The beings retreat. They have witnessed this pattern countless times, but never like this. Never born from defiance instead of surrender. Something unprecedented is happening. To the chaos gods, it feels like death. Their domains collapse. Their followers lose faith. The tides of hate, lust, and despair that once fed them now dissolve into something purer. Determination, empathy, understanding. They try to strike back. They unleash storms, plagues, and madness. But the storms falter. The plagues fade. The madness turns inward and consumes itself. Because you cannot corrupt what already accepts its flaws. Humanity has learned to look at its own darkness and not run. That acceptance is poison to chaos. The Imperium struggles to comprehend what it's seeing. Ships no longer need navigators. They move through the warp by instinct. Astropaths speak without words. The ecclesiarchy's cathedrals fill with golden light, not from relics or fire, but from within the people themselves. Priests fall to their knees, weeping. Not from fear, from realization. They finally understand the Emperor's last lesson. He never wanted worship. He wanted evolution, and yet evolution has consequences. Not all can endure the awakening. Some minds shatter under the weight of shared thought. Some reject it entirely, fleeing into isolation, screaming that individuality is dying. They are not wrong. Every step toward unity blurs the line between self and species. Every connection strengthens the whole, but weakens the ego. The human soul is changing shape. No longer singular, no longer fragile. Something new is being born, not a hive mind, not a god but a chorus, a species that thinks in harmony but dreams alone. The Emperor watches this unfold through the veil of eternity. He feels his burden lifting. He feels his strength returning, not as power but as peace. The endless war within the warp slows. The demons grow fewer, their screams distant. The sea of madness calms. For the first time, he allows himself to rest. Not to die, but to let go. Because the war he fought for 10,000 years no longer needs him. Humanity has taken his place. And in that stillness, he speaks, not aloud, not through thunder, but through every human heart at once. You have become what I dreamed. You have learned what I could not teach. You no longer need my hand to guide you. But remember this, you are still free. The words echo across the galaxy like a sigh through creation. Every human feels them, even if they do not understand. And in that moment, the Emperor's light expands one final time, not as blinding radiance, but as quiet warmth, the warmth of release. No one knows if the Emperor truly dies that day or if he ascends beyond comprehension. The golden throne falls silent. The Astronomicon fades, not into darkness, but into equilibrium. Ships still travel. People still dream. The light no longer burns because it no longer needs to. Humanity's minds have become their own stars. The galaxy does not end. It transforms. The warp remains, but gentler, a sea tamed by the will of its creators. The Imperium dissolves, replaced by something nameless, a network of worlds bound not by rule but by resonance. They no longer call themselves an empire. They call themselves the Continuum. And from the center of it, on Terra's quiet plains, the ruins of the throne glow faintly with gold. The custodes still stand guard, though there is nothing left to guard. They stand because duty itself has become sacred memory, the last echo of the age that ended. The awakening is not victory. It is not perfection. It is simply the next step, the one the Emperor always knew must come. Humanity has not escaped its flaws. It has learned to live with them, and in doing so, it has become eternal, not through conquest, not through gods, but through understanding. The Emperor once said that to be human is to endure. Now, to be human is to awaken, and somewhere, beyond the veil where light and silence meet, a faint whisper lingers, neither divine nor mortal, but infinite. It was never about me, it was always about you. Stay till the end, because the next chapter reveals what becomes of the galaxy after the Emperor's silence, the birth of a new age, and the fate of those who remember the old one. When the light went out, the galaxy did not end. It simply began again. For 10,000 years, the Astronomicon had been the heart of human civilization, the beacon that guided ships, the proof that the Emperor still watched. And then one day it was gone. There was no explosion, no scream across the warp, just stillness. For a moment, silence filled the void between stars. Navigators opened their minds, expecting blindness, and found something else, calm. The warp, once a storm of screaming energy, had changed. It was no longer wildfire, it was deep water, vast, heavy, slow. It moved with rhythm instead of rage. The old dangers, demon storms, the endless howls of madness fell quiet. What remained was strange but peaceful, and in that silence, humanity felt something they had not felt in millennia. Freedom. The Imperium had relied on fear for so long that no one remembered how to live without it. Entire worlds froze, waiting for command from Terra. When no command came, something unexpected happened. They began to think for themselves. At first, it was chaos. Leaders arguing, armies uncertain, but slowly cities remembered how to rule without decree. Farmers remembered how to plant without orders. Scientists rediscovered how to question without heresy. The bureaucratic towers that had defined the Imperium for ages began to crumble, not from rebellion, but from irrelevance. The galaxy was too vast to be ruled by silence. And so, humanity began to speak again. The custodes remained upon Terra. They guarded the silent throne, though no one ordered them to. They did not know what else to do. The golden throne had collapsed inward, a shell of molten gold and glass. In its center was nothing but faint dust that glimmered like sunlight on water. They believed that dust was all that remained of their emperor. But sometimes, when they stood in silence, they swore they heard a heartbeat echo through the hall, and slow, distant, like the pulse of the universe itself. They never told anyone. The ecclesiarchy fractured. For the first time, faith had no answer. The sermons that once roared across hive cities became whispers of confusion. Some priests declared that the emperor had ascended to a higher realm and would one day return. Others insisted he had never existed at all, but a few, the quiet ones, the ones who truly listened, began to preach something new. They said the emperor's silence was not abandonment. It was permission. Permission to live, to grow, to change without fear. They called themselves the Keepers of the Flame. They taught that divinity was not in worship, but in will, that the emperor's final gift was the understanding that every human carried his spark. Their message spread faster than any dogma ever had, because it asked for no obedience, only courage. The Adeptus Mechanicus changed too. For 10,000 years they had served the machine god, a fragment of the emperor's myth. But now, with the throne silent, they began to question the very source of their faith. Some collapsed into madness, their binary hymns breaking into static. Others opened their archives and remembered something ancient. Curiosity. They started to build again, not to replicate, but to create. For the first time in an age, the forges of Mars burned not with prayer, but with invention, and what they built was different. Not machines of war, but machines of life. Engines that could heal planets, regrow atmospheres, repair the wounds of millennia. It was as if the silence of the Emperor had unbound their hands. But not all welcomed the new age. There were still those who feared freedom. The Inquisition fractured into factions, some hunting those who embraced change, others protecting them. Civil wars erupted, brief and brutal. Worlds burned, then rebuilt themselves again. Out of the ashes, a new idea took root. If humanity could no longer be ruled by a single throne, perhaps it could be guided by memory. And so, from the remnants of the Administratum, scholars and historians formed a new order, the Archivum Humanitas, the Library of Mankind. Their mission was simple: to remember, to preserve every truth, every lie, every lesson of the past age. They traveled from world to world, collecting relics, testimonies, and data before time erased them. They did not judge. They simply recorded. They became the conscience of a species finally ready to know itself. Centuries passed. The old Imperium faded into legend. The word emperor became myth, a story told around fires beneath alien skies, but his influence never vanished. It lived in the minds of the awakened, in the scientists who cured plagues without prayer, in the soldiers who fought without hate, in the children who looked to the stars not for salvation, but for discovery. Humanity was no longer united by empire or fear. It was united by memory, the memory of struggle, of endurance, of the golden light that once burned against the dark. They called this new era the Age of Understanding. In this age, the warp itself changed shape. No longer a sea of torment, it became a reflection, a mirror of thought and purpose. Ships traveled through it, not by force, but by harmony. A navigator no longer steered with terror and sacrifice, but with calm focus, aligning their own mind to the symphony of human thought. Travel became art, not gamble. The warp still held dangers, but they were familiar, echoes of the past rather than monsters of the present. And deep within that gentle ocean, a faint light still pulsed. Not the Astronomicon. Something smaller, softer, a heartbeat. It beat in rhythm with humanity itself. The beings beyond the veil watched. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but never this. The species that refused to surrender had changed the nature of reality without conquest or worship. They had found balance for the first time. Even those ancient forces hesitated. They wondered if the cycle of creation and dissolution might finally be broken. In their stillness, they heard something new: laughter. The quiet, mortal laughter of a child on a distant world looking up at the night sky. And they realized that, in all their eternity, they had never truly understood joy. Somewhere beyond all stars, something stirs, a presence that feels like the Emperor, but lighter, freer. Not a god chained to a throne, but a thought moving through creation like wind through grass. It touches the dreams of newborns. It guides lost travelers. It whispers courage into the hearts of those who still fear. It does not command. It does not rule. It simply reminds, a presence, eternal but unseen, that says only, "You are enough." The people who feel it call it by many names: the light, the memory, the father of mankind. But most simply call it the echo of what once was and what still is. The galaxy, scarred by 10,000 years of war, begins to heal. Worlds once blackened by fire bloom again. Ancient machines awaken not to destroy but to rebuild. Even Xenos races, long divided from mankind, begin to listen. They sense the change in the air, the same quiet harmony that now flows through the warp. The Eldar call it the still song. The Orcs call it the good fight that never ends. Even the Necrons, in their metallic silence, pause as if remembering what life once meant. For the first time in galactic history, existence moves in balance, and yet, deep in the heart of the warp, shadows remain. Remnants of chaos drift like smoke, weakened but unbroken. They remember the taste of fear, the worship of despair, the endless power of corruption. They whisper to themselves, everything ends. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps one day humanity will fall again, through arrogance, through forgetfulness, through the same flaws that define it, but not today. Today, the species that defied gods and destiny stands in quiet peace, its mind no longer chained by fear. The Emperor's dream has not been fulfilled. It has been surpassed. The age after the throne is not an ending. It is a beginning written in silence, a story told not by war, but by memory, a story of a species that learned that godhood was never about power. It was about responsibility, and now, at last, the galaxy breathes. If you listen closely, across the soft hum of the universe, you might still hear him, not in thunder, not in light, but in the quiet certainty within every human soul that whispers, I am still here. Stay till the end, because the next chapter will uncover how the memory of the Emperor becomes legend, and how his name turns from history into myth that guides a new humanity through the stars. Time erases all things. Empires fall, names fade, stars themselves turn to dust, but stories endure. Long after the last cathedral of the Imperium has crumbled to ash, the story of the Emperor still moves between the stars, not as faith, not as doctrine, but as legend. It has no single version. It has 1,000 voices. Each tells a different truth, and all are true. In some corners of the galaxy, they call him the Golden King, a figure of light who once ruled over 1,000,000 worlds before vanishing into the sun. On other worlds, they call him the Sleeper, who rests beneath the earth and dreams of mankind's next dawn. To others still, he is the last warrior, who fought an enemy made of chaos itself and built the stars from his own blood. The names change, the details twist, but the heart remains, a being who gave everything so humanity could live free. Children still whisper his story under alien skies. They draw his symbol, the twin-headed eagle, in dust, not knowing what it means, only that it feels right. To them, he is not a god. He is a memory of courage. When they face darkness, they repeat an ancient phrase whose origin is long forgotten. The light of man endures. No one remembers who said it first, but the words echo the last thought of the Emperor himself. On far worlds, storytellers gather in great halls built from glass and stone. They speak of the age of fire, when men worshipped machines, when gods walked among mortals, when the stars themselves went mad. They tell of a man who stood alone against eternity, who refused to become a god even when all begged him to. They speak of his throne, his sacrifice, his silence, and when they finish, there's always the same pause, the quiet moment when the listeners wonder, was he real? And the storytellers smile, answering, he must have been. Because we are. For legends are not made of facts. They are made of needs, and humanity still needs him, not to worship, but to remember what it means to fight for something greater than survival. Every civilization that rises after the Imperium builds its own version of his myth. The colonies of the core worlds paint him as the first scientist. The frontier worlds speak of him as the wanderer who taught men to light the stars. Even the post-human societies, beings of light and thought, revere him as the first dreamer, the one who taught creation to imagine itself. The legend shifts with every telling, but always returns to the same truth, that one will, no matter how small, can stand against the infinite. The Archivum Humanitas, the great library born from the ashes of the Inquisition, preserves all versions of his story. Its halls stretch for miles beneath the surface of New Terra. Its scholars wear no uniforms, no symbols, only silence. They do not argue which legend is correct. They collect them all, because they know that the truth of the Emperor is not found in words, but in what those words make people remember. Every 1,000 years, they gather for the recital of flames, a night when the archivists open the oldest records and read them aloud. They speak of the heresy, of betrayal of gods born from human emotion. They speak of the golden throne, the endless war, and the Emperor's final smile. When the reading ends, they extinguish their lights, leaving only the stars visible through the glass above. And in that darkness, they repeat an ancient vow. We are the continuation of his dream. In the outer reaches of the galaxy, where no ships travel and the void feels endless, explorers sometimes report strange encounters. They tell of a golden figure walking across the surface of dead worlds, of a voice that speaks without sound, guiding lost travelers to safety, of machines that begin to function again after millennia, powered by nothing but a warm light. Some call these miracles, others call them stories, but those who experience them describe the same feeling: peace. As if the universe itself remembers kindness. Even the warp, that once mad ocean, carries echoes of his name. Psychers, drifting through it in meditation, claim to hear a faint hymn, sung by countless voices in harmony. It is not prayer. It is gratitude. The demons that remain avoid it. They call it the sound that hurts, for it burns them not with flame, but with understanding, and deep within that song, one can almost hear words: endure, evolve, become. The three truths of humanity, spoken now not by a god, but by the universe that learned from one. The beings beyond the veil still watch, older than stars, patient as ever. They remember the Emperor, the mortal who defied eternity, and wonder if his defiance has changed even them. For now, when they look into the fabric of creation, they see patterns they never made, patterns of will, compassion, and choice. They see that even silence can sing, and perhaps for the first time in their existence, they understand what it means to hope. But legends are fragile things. As centuries turn to millennia, even memory begins to fade. On some worlds, the Emperor becomes a myth so distant that he is confused with the sun. On others, he becomes a cautionary tale, a story of pride and fall. And in some dark corners, there are whispers that he never existed at all. Yet even those who deny him still live in a world he made possible. For belief or disbelief, worship or rejection, all are proof of freedom. And that freedom was his final gift. One fragment of his legend survives unchanged through every age. A poem etched on a piece of golden glass found in the ruins of Old Terra. No one knows who wrote it, but it is said to be the last words ever spoken by the Emperor himself. I was never your god. I was your reflection. Look not up to me, but forward to yourselves. Those lines are now engraved in every academy, every ship, every world that remembers the name of man. Children learn them before they learn their own. In the age that follows, humanity no longer measures greatness by conquest or faith. They measure it by endurance, by understanding, by how well they remember what came before, their art, their science, their philosophy. All trace back to that single legend of the man who sat upon the golden throne. He is no longer the Emperor. He is the example, and through his example, the species he loved has learned the final truth, that even the smallest light, carried long enough, becomes a star. On quiet nights, in the farthest corners of the galaxy, a golden shimmer sometimes passes through the void. No sensors can track it, no ships can follow. It moves with the rhythm of a heartbeat, slow, steady, eternal. Some say it is the last echo of the Emperor's soul, wandering the stars to see what became of his children. Others say it is simply the light of humanity itself, reflected through time. But those who witness it feel the same peace, the same certainty that once guided billions through darkness. And whether they name it God, dream, or legend, they all whisper the same words. He never left, because legends do not die. They evolve, just as those who tell them do. The Emperor's body may have turned to dust, his empire to memory, but his essence lives in every choice humanity makes to rise again after falling. And as long as mankind remembers how to endure, he endures too. He was never meant to be eternal. But the meaning he gave the universe will be. The golden light burns on, not in the heavens, but in the hearts of those who still believe in the impossible. That, in the end, was the Emperor's truest power, not command, not creation, but inspiration, Stay till the end, because the next chapter reveals how the universe itself begins to respond to humanity's legend. When myth starts to shape reality once more and a new cycle begins. The universe does not end. It turns. Like a wheel, it circles through creation and destruction, birth and silence, light and shadow. Every age believes itself to be the last, and every age becomes a story told by the next. Now, long after the Emperor's name has faded into legend, the galaxy turns once more. Humanity has changed beyond recognition. They are no longer bound to flesh or machine. They live in many forms, light, thought, and matter intertwined. Some walk as living energy. Others sleep within stars. Many drift between worlds as patterns of data and memory. Yet all remember one truth. They were once human. And though they no longer kneel, they still look up at the stars with the same question their ancestors whispered long ago. What comes next? The answer begins with a story. It starts on a small world orbiting a quiet sun, a world long forgotten, its deserts littered with the bones of ancient cathedrals. A child is born there, not human as we once understood, but not alien either, something in between. Her eyes glow faintly gold. When she dreams, she sees faces that never lived, cities that never existed, and a throne made of light instead of metal. Her people call her the Rememberer. They say she carries the memory of an age that came before memory itself. As she grows, she begins to hear a hum deep within her mind, the same hum that once pulsed through the Astronomicon. It calls not from the heavens, but from within. She listens. She follows, and as she listens, others begin to hear it too. Across countless worlds, beings of every shape and kind pause in their endless work. They look to the sky, and for reasons they cannot name, they feel nostalgia. Something ancient stirs. Not the Emperor himself, but the pattern of will he left imprinted on creation. It moves through the stars like wind through grass. The cycle of light is beginning again. The Rememberer travels far from her home, guided by visions of golden storms and forgotten songs. She finds relics buried in the ruins of old Terra, fragments of words carved into stone, half erased by time. I was never your god. I was your reflection. When she touches them, the air trembles. The dusk glows, and somewhere deep in the warp, light answers, not a blinding radiance, but a spark, faint, patient, waiting. The beings beyond the veil, who once watched in silence, awaken. They feel the ripple moving through reality and recognize it instantly. It is the same signature they felt long ago, the pulse of will-defying entropy, the echo of a mind that refused to surrender, but this time it is not one mind. It is countless. Humanity's descendants, scattered across the stars, have begun to think in rhythm once more. Not through empire, not through faith, but through remembrance. The story of the Emperor, the myth of endurance, has become the foundation of their consciousness. And from it, a new light forms. It begins as whispers in the warp, not of fear or madness, but of creation. Worlds begin to dream again. Planets thought dead sprout new life. Old suns reignite, even the warp itself grows quiet. It storms, folding into calm patterns like breath after long sobbing. The universe, it seems, remembers. Every atom, every particle holds within it the echo of will, the memory of what it meant to resist. And through that memory, creation begins anew. The Rememberer stands at the center of this awakening, unaware that she is its focus. Everywhere she walks, the void brightens. Her presence stabilizes the impossible. Machines long dormant flicker to life. Even the stars seem to move closer together, aligning themselves as if drawn to her song. She does not command this. She simply is, and those who follow her, beings of every world, descendants of 1,000 ages, feel a growing unity, not of flesh, not of mind, but of purpose. They do not call it religion. They call it the Second Dawn. The Second Dawn is not an empire. It has no rulers, no armies, no laws. It spreads through connection, the sharing of dreams, the resonance of thought. Every being who feels it becomes part of a quiet harmony that shapes the cosmos. When they work, the universe listens. When they hope, the stars brighten. When they despair, the night deepens. Reality once again responds to consciousness. The old cycle of gods and mortals is returning, but differently, because this time, the gods are not separate. They are born from within. The rememberer begins to see visions of the past, the emperor on his throne, the burning of Terra, the endless wars that once defined the galaxy. But she does not see them with sorrow. She sees them with gratitude. Without that age of pain, her world would never have existed. Without the emperor's sacrifice, there would have been no light to follow. She realizes what the beings beyond the veil never understood, that every cycle must carry forward the memory of the one before. Otherwise, existence becomes repetition without meaning. That memory is the light that guides creation's turning. The beings stir uneasily. They feel the cycle of light shifting beyond their control. For the first time in eternity, creation is evolving consciously. The universe is not reacting to emotion anymore. It is choosing. The old boundaries between warp and reality blur completely. Thought and matter become one. The gods of chaos are gone, but their essence remains, no longer twisted, simply balanced. Rage becomes courage. Change becomes growth. Despair becomes wisdom. Desire becomes love. The Emperor's dream has woven itself into the laws of physics, and yet, deep within this harmony, something stirs, a shadow, faint but familiar, because every light casts one. Every balance trembles, and the cycle of light, like every cycle before it, carries the seed of its own ending. The Rememberer senses it in her final vision, a golden figure standing before her, smiling softly. She does not know his name, but she feels the warmth of his gaze. He speaks without words, his voice both gentle and infinite. Do not fear the shadow. It keeps the light alive. Then he is gone, leaving behind only a single line of radiant dust drifting upward into the stars. Centuries later, the Rememberer's followers build nothing in her name. They leave no temples, no thrones, no cathedrals. Instead, they teach their children to tell stories, stories of courage, of endurance, of love stronger than despair. They say that every story told in truth adds one more spark to the sky. And so, the night grows brighter with every generation. The cycle continues. Across the farthest reaches of time, the galaxy glows once more. Not with empires or wars, but with endless light. Each spark a memory, each memory a beginning. The universe has learned its lesson. Creation and destruction are not enemies. They are rhythm, and within that rhythm, the legacy of the Emperor, the man who defied eternity, lives on. Not as a being, not as a god, but as the pattern that keeps the stars turning. The beings beyond the veil finally understand. They see the cycle not as error, but as purpose. And in their ancient stillness, they feel something new: gratitude. For the first time since existence began, they bow their heads, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Because through the defiance of a single species, they have learned meaning, and somewhere between light and shadow, thought and matter, a whisper passes through all things. It is not a command. It is not prophecy. It is simply a reminder. Remember what you are, and keep the fire burning, because the cycle of light never truly ends. It only waits for the next spark, for the next dreamer, the next rebel, the next mortal who dares to look at the impossible and say, "I will try anyway." That is how creation survives. That is how eternity begins again. There comes a moment at the end of every age when even light seems to forget why it shines, when stars grow dim and time itself slows to listen. That moment has come again. The galaxies have cooled. Worlds that once burned with life now drift quietly, their oceans frozen, their skies filled with silence. Civilizations long ascended have faded into thought, and even thought has begun to fade. Only memory remains. And within that memory, a pulse, faint, golden, eternal. It moves not through space, but through being. the echo of every choice, every dream, every act of courage that ever existed. It is the sum of all humanity once was. It is the Emperor's final heartbeat. For ages it has wandered unseen, through dust, through atoms, through the empty corridors of forgotten time. It has no form, no direction. It simply is. But as the last suns collapse, something within that heartbeat changes. It remembers. It remembers flesh and pain, faith and rebellion. It remembers standing alone against eternity and refusing to break, and in that remembering, the light grows stronger. From the dead heart of a dying universe, a spark flares, small at first, then brighter. It spreads like dawn through nothingness, reaching the edges of the void. There is no matter to carry it, no air to hear it, no life to see it. And yet, everything feels it, because this light is not physical. It is meaning. It is the memory of what once fought against despair, the echo of all who refused to yield. It is the last light. It begins to hum, not sound, but resonance, a vibration that stirs what remains of existence. The beings beyond the veil awaken from their slumber of endless calm. They feel the pulse moving through the foundations of reality and recognize it instantly. They whisper among themselves, not with words but with awe. For this is no longer the light of one God or one species. It is the combined essence of all who ever were, every soul that ever lived, every creature that ever hoped, every will that ever said no to the darkness. All have become one. At the center of the pulse, a shape begins to form, not a man, not a god, but an idea. It is golden and human-shaped, yet endless, its edges fading into infinity. Its eyes hold both sorrow and joy, both beginning and end. It does not speak. It does not need to. The universe knows its name. It is the Emperor reborn, not as ruler, but as remembrance, not as savior, but as cycle. He is the final reflection of everything he once protected, the echo of mankind's will to exist. The beings beyond the veil bow their heads. For countless eternities they have watched creation rise and fall. They have seen gods born and die, universes bloom and fade. But this is different. This is not the beginning of another cycle. It is the realization that the cycle itself is the purpose, that existence was never about reaching an end. It was about remembering why it began, and that remembering has taken form. The last light does not reignite the stars. It does not rebuild the worlds. It simply touches the void, and the void begins to feel. Cold matter stirs. Dust swirls. From the ashes of forgotten atoms, warmth flickers. Not life, not yet, but the potential for it, because the light carries within it the pattern of creation, the blueprint written in the hearts of those who once dared to dream. It does not command. It invites, and the void answers. The first colors return, soft blues, pale golds, faint whispers of violet. Not explosions, but gentle births. The beings watch as time itself bends around the light, spiraling backward and forward at once. They see stars forming where there were none, galaxies curling into being, the same familiar shapes emerging again, but calmer, wiser. They understand now. This is not the repetition of the past. It is the healing of it, creation reborn not from fear or chaos, but from memory and peace. And at the center of it all, the Emperor's essence watches. He feels no pride, no triumph, only fulfillment, because this quiet renewal was always the dream. Not the conquest of the galaxy, not the dominion of man, but the simple continuation of light in defiance of darkness. He sees his reflection in everything, in the first particle to spark, in the first warmth to spread, in the first whisper of awareness to stir in the void. And he understands. He has become what he once fought for. The Guardian has become the galaxy. The beings beyond the veil step forward, their forms dissolving into the new creation. They do not resist. They have seen enough to know that meaning cannot be separated from being. One by one, they fade into the light. They become part of the rhythm, no longer watchers, but participants. Their eternity ends not in silence, but in song, and that song becomes the heartbeat of the newborn universe. Eons pass, though in this place, Time is only a shadow of what it once was. New stars rise, new worlds form, and on one of those worlds, under a young, bright sun, a new species awakens. They are not human, though their hands are familiar. Their eyes hold the same spark, the same hunger to build, to question, to dream. They will call themselves something else. They will tell new stories. They will make new gods. But somewhere in the deepest parts of their memory, without knowing why, they will feel drawn to the light of their sun. They will feel gratitude for something ancient they can no longer name. And one day, one of them will look at the sky and ask, "Who taught us to hope?" And somewhere in the folds of reality, the last light will flicker, a small golden shimmer, warm and familiar, whispering without sound, "I remember you." Because the Emperor was never just man or myth. He was the lesson written into existence itself. That meaning is not given, it is made. That gods are born not from power, but from purpose. That even at the end of all things, the will to endure can make the void sing again. The last light drifts onward, endless, patient. It carries the memory of all that was and all that will ever be. It is the whisper in every beginning, the calm at every end. It is the thought behind every act of kindness, the spark behind every rebellion, the voice behind every prayer that begins with please and ends with thank you. It is the soul of mankind, carried beyond time. And so the universe turns again. Another dawn, another story, another dream waiting to be born. But this time, it begins with peace, not war. With light, not fire. With love, not fear. Because the last light endures, quiet, patient, eternal. The dream of a man who refused to be a god and became something greater. The memory of defiance turned into creation. The emperor of mankind, now the heart of the universe. And so ends the tale. The story of struggle, of faith, of endurance. The story of light that would not die. The story of the emperor and the last light that still burns, even when nothing else remains. The stars remember. The void remembers, and as long as one spark endures, so will we.